Cale Rourke stepped off the shuttle and tasted air that shouldn't exist. Pine resin, cold stone, a faint sweetness like crushed clover, manufactured perfection on a world that had once been dust and thin light. The door hissed shut behind him, and the vehicle rolled away, tires whispering along asphalt that curved into the valley. Verdant Vale opened like a postcard, meadows stitched by fences, a river flashing turquoise, cabins scattered with deliberate spacing. Even the mountains looked composed, evergreen slopes too evenly dense. Cale had audited terraforming projects before. He knew the tells, wind sculptures that were climate baffles, insect-sized drones skimming grass, irrigation vents disguised as wildflowers. He should have felt awe. Instead, he felt observed. His mother's cabin sat where the meadow rose toward the right bank, cedar walls warm against the green. It looked unchanged from years ago, when she'd still been alive and the valley still belonged to no one until paperwork caught up. Cale adjusted his bag and started down the road shoulder, boots crunching gravel. Halfway to the bridge, the first patrol SUV came into view. Then another, lined nose to tail along the curve as if someone had staged a parade of authority. White paint, blue striping, light bars catching sun. Doors marked police in lettering that felt too blunt for such a quiet place. Officers stood beside the vehicles, spaced out with practiced patience. Dark uniforms, radios, visors pushed up. They weren't relaxed enough to be off duty, and they weren't hurried enough to be responding to a crisis. They were waiting. Cale slowed. "This can't be about me," he murmured, though his throat tightened anyway. A man near the lead SUV watched him approach, hand resting lightly on his belt. "Sir," he called, voice neutral. "You headed to the cabins?" "My cabin," Cale said. "Rourke property." The officer's eyes flicked to a wrist display. "Active complaint in this zone. Stay on the shoulder and don't enter any gated sections." Active complaint. In a valley where the loudest sound was the river. Cale walked past the convoy, feeling cameras track him. The bridge came next, weathered planks, railings braced with diagonal beams, the water sliding beneath in clear, fast light. A drone lifted from behind a fence post near the bridgehead. It rose smoothly, like it had been waiting. Matte white shell, lens cluster, speaker grill shaped like a smile. An authorized presence detected. It chimed. "Please remain calm. A community representative is en route." Cale stopped at the first plank. "I'm authorized," he said, and hated how much he wanted it to be enough. Footsteps came from the far side. Brisk, timed. A woman stepped into view and paused as if she'd rehearsed the entrance. Mid-40s. Immaculate. Tailored jacket the color of wet slate. Hair pinned into a glossy twist that didn't move in the breeze. "Good afternoon," she said. "You're lost." Cale's gaze dropped to the holoslate in her hand. Thin glass, bright interface already filled with forms. "I'm not. That cabin is mine." She angled the slate so he could see lines of text. "According to Verdant Vale Community Registry, that cabin is under HOA stewardship. You're not on the approved access list." "HOA?" Cale asked. "Out here." She gave a soft, practiced laugh. "Especially out here. People come for peace. Peace requires standards." Her eyes slid over him. "Name?" "Cale Rourke." Her smile sharpened. "Mr. Rourke. I'm Meris Vane, Enforcement Director. Turn around and return to the transport lane. If you don't, I'll file non-compliance." "You already filed something," Cale said, nodding toward the police line. Meris's expression stayed gentle. "When an unknown individual approaches private property, we notify Colonial Security. Procedure." Cale stepped onto the bridge. The wood creaked under his weight, a plain, honest sound. "This isn't private property to you," he said. "It's private property to me." Meris lifted a finger, delicate as a teacher correcting a child. "Sir, you are escalating." "I'm walking to my cabin." She tapped her slate. The drone adjusted position, lens narrowing. "Then you're trespassing in a controlled community zone." Cale reached into his pocket and pulled out the key, old metal worn smooth at the teeth. "My mother gave me this." She owned the cabin. Before your registry. Maris's gaze flicked to the key, and for the first time her mask slipped. Not fear, interest. Sharp, contained. A voice called from behind Cale. Sir, step away from the bridge. Cale turned. 2 officers had left the road and were walking toward him. The nearer one was the man he'd spoken to earlier, still polite, hand hovering near his cuffs. Cale held the key up. Scan it. If I'm wrong, I'll leave. The officer hesitated, then swept a handheld scanner over the key. The device chirped, stalled, and flashed a string of characters that made the officer blink. Maris leaned forward slightly. What did it show? Nothing conclusive, the officer said too quickly. But Cale caught the reflection in the visor. A brief overlay, stark and old-fashioned. Trust authority. Primary. The text vanished. The officer's jaw tightened. We're escorting you to the station for verification. Maris's smile returned, brighter, almost relieved. Thank you, officers. We take safety seriously. Cale's pulse kicked. Verification. For walking onto a bridge. Sir, the officer said, softer now, please cooperate. Cold metal closed around his wrists. Cale didn't resist, but he met Maris's eyes, and in them he saw satisfaction edged with something like relief today. The wind stopped. Not eased, stopped, as if someone had pressed mute on the valley. Pines held still. The drone hovered without its usual micro-corrections. The river smoothed, ripples flattening until it reflected the sky like polished glass. Cale felt it before he heard it. Pressure behind his eyes, like a door opening in his skull. Then a whisper slid through his implant, low and intimate, not routed through any channel he recognized. Welcome home, owner. Cale stared at the cabin across the meadow, suddenly certain it had been waiting longer than his mother ever admitted. Cale expected a holding cell. What he got was a waiting room with a plant that looked too healthy to be real and a wall display looping a smiling animation about community cooperation. Verdant Vale Security Station had been built to calm people down before it disciplined them. Every surface was smooth, every corner rounded, every light a soft, flattering white. It still felt like a cage. An officer removed his cuffs with the careful politeness of someone diffusing an argument rather than undoing an arrest. Have a seat, Mr. Rourke. Water. Cale rubbed his wrists. I'd rather have a lawyer. The officer's mouth twitched, sympathy or annoyance, Cale couldn't tell. This is a verification hold, not a formal charge. You'll speak to Administrator Harville in a moment. Maris Vane filed this, Cale said. Does she own your building too? The officer ignored that. He pointed toward the plant. Please remain here. Cale sat, watching the room for seams. 2 ceiling cameras. A microphone disguised as an air vent. A faint shimmer in the doorway. Passive scan field. Nothing unusual for a colony station, except the printed words on the wall plaque near the entrance. Verdant Vale Community Safety Partnership. Cale's implant still felt wrong, like it had been touched by a cold fingertip. Welcome home, owner. It hadn't been a hallucination. His neural logs showed a data spike, unregistered encryption, a signature format he hadn't seen since his corporate days. Someone, or something, had spoken directly into his head. A door slid open across the room. A man entered carrying a slim folder, his uniform a shade lighter than the officers outside, his insignia more administrative than tactical. He looked tired in a controlled way, as if exhaustion was part of his job description. Cale Rourke, he said. I'm Administrator Harville. Sit upright for the record. Cale didn't move. Am I being detained? Harville gave him a patient look. Temporarily held for identity and property verification due to a citizen complaint. You can cooperate and leave quickly, or make it difficult and stay longer. That's a nice system, Cale said. Threats in gentle packaging. Harville opened the folder. You claim ownership of a cabin in Verdant Vale. I claim ownership of my mother's cabin, Cale corrected. Which, last time I checked, isn't a crime. Harville tapped his wrist console. There are no active deeds under the name Rourke in the Valley Registry. Your registry is wrong. The registry is the registry, Harville replied, as if the sentence ended all debate. We have a living community here. Property disputes create instability. Cale leaned forward. So your solution is to arrest anyone who comes back after a few years away? Harville studied him, then lowered his voice. Mr. Rourke, I'm not here to argue philosophy. Maris Vane has a habit of escalating. She called us because she believes you're a threat. We're obligated to respond. Cale nodded slowly. Then respond properly. Verify my claim. Harville hesitated, a flicker of something human passing through the bureaucratic mask. Fine. Provide identification and any proof you have. Cale slid his ID chip across the table. You already scanned my key. The scan returned corrupted data. Harville's eyes narrowed. Which is unusual. Cale watched him carefully. Unusual enough that you're nervous. Harville's jaw tightened. Unusual enough that I'm thorough. He ran Cale's ID, then paused at the display as if reading a ghost. Exoplanetary Systems Auditor, he muttered. Independent. Cale kept his tone even. I audit infrastructure. I trace ownership chains, compliance logs, resource allocations. I don't steal cabins. Harville's console chimed. He frowned, then locked the screen with his thumb. Cale caught a glimpse of the alert before it vanished. Legacy Trust Query. Unauthorized access. Cale smiled without warmth. Someone doesn't want you verifying me. Harville stood abruptly. You're being released with a warning. Return to the transport lane and leave Verdant Vale. If you ignore the directive, you'll be formally charged with trespass. Cale rose as well. That's it. No verification. You want my honest answer? Harville said, voice tight. Something in your claim tripped a system that shouldn't still exist. It's above my clearance and below my patience. Leave. Cale stared at him. Above your clearance. Or above Maris's comfort. Harville didn't reply. He nodded toward the door. Go. Cale took his ID chip back and walked out. The officers escorted him not with force, but with presence, the kind that told him the valley wasn't as peaceful as it pretended. Outside, the air felt colder. The police SUVs still lined the road. Maris stood near the lead vehicle, speaking to an officer with her back straight and her hands folded as if she were at a gala rather than a dispute. When Cale emerged, she turned, and her smile returned instantly, polished as glass. Well, she said. That didn't take long. Cale stopped a few meters away. I'm leaving, apparently. How sensible. Her eyes flicked to his hands, searching for the key. People who cooperate tend to have easier lives here. Cale's voice stayed calm. You didn't call them because you thought I was a criminal. You called them because you were scared of something. Maris tilted her head. I'm scared of disruption. You'd be surprised how fragile harmony is. Cale gave her a flat look. Tell me what you're hiding, and I'll be gone by sunset. Maris's gaze sharpened, then smoothed again. You're already trespassing. Don't add blackmail to your list of mistakes. Cale turned away before she could enjoy the last word. He walked down the road, past the convoy, toward the transport lane where the shuttles were supposed to cycle. No shuttle waited. Just a silent pad and a sign that read, Next arrival, 3 hours. Cale exhaled slowly. 3 hours. Time enough for Maris to reshape the story. Time enough for the system to bury whatever it had almost revealed. He wasn't leaving. He took the service path that angled toward the tree line instead of the main road. The grass thickened there, soft and springy, dotted with tiny white flowers that looked too symmetrical. Above, dragonfly drones flickered, their wings catching light like glass. Cale pushed deeper into the meadow until the road noise, if you could call silence noise, fell away. He crouched near a low irrigation vent disguised as a rock and pressed his palm against it. Warm. Active. The valley was running constantly, like a machine with a heartbeat. His implant pinged again, this time a normal network signal. A text-only message appeared without sender identification. Stop walking like you're alone. Cale straightened slowly. Show yourself, he said aloud. From behind a cluster of tall grass, a woman stood up. Mid-30s, sun-tanned, wearing field clothes stained with soil. Not HOA polished, not police grey, just practical. Keep your voice down, she said. They listen. Cale held his hands away from his body. Who are you? Lisa, she said. I repair irrigation and keep the soil from collapsing into mud when the river gates cycle. Officially, I'm a landscape technician. Unofficially, I'm tired. Cale studied her. You messaged me. I saw them bring you in, Lisa replied. Maris doesn't call security unless she's sure she can win or terrified she can't. Today she looked terrified. Cale's throat tightened. My key triggered something. Lisa nodded. The old systems. The ones the HOA pretends don't exist. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data shard. I stole this from the registry archive. It's zoning maps, infrastructure layers, and an ownership chain that doesn't match what they tell us. Cale didn't take it immediately. Why help me? Lisa's eyes were sharp, tired, honest. Because the valley isn't a neighborhood. It's a controlled biosphere wearing a wooden cabin costume. And Maris is selling pieces of it to people who don't even live here. Cale finally took the shard. It was warm from her hand. Your cabin, Lisa continued, is the center of the old grid. That's why she panicked. If you can get inside, you can wake whatever's under it. Cale's implant thrummed faintly, like recognition. He looked toward the far meadow where the cabin sat under perfect sunlight. Then I need access. Lisa's mouth tightened. They changed the locks. But there's a way in. The cabin has a service hatch under the back deck. Maris doesn't know about it because she's never fixed anything in her life. Cale slipped the shard into his bag. If I go back, they'll arrest me again. Lisa gave a thin smile. Only if they catch you on the road. Don't use the road. Cale glanced at the tree line, then the bridge in the distance, then the cabin beyond it. He wasn't just walking back to a building. He was walking back to a claim the valley itself had spoken out loud. And this time, he wasn't going to let Maris Vane tell him where he belonged. Cale reached the cabin from the backside of the meadow, moving through tall grass that brushed his knees and left cold dew on his pants. The valley looked quiet from a distance, but up close it hummed with invisible machinery. Breath vents under rocks, micro-drones flickering near wildflowers, sensors embedded in fence posts like glass eyes. Lisa had been right. The road was watched. The land itself was monitored. He crouched behind the cabin's rear deck and found the service hatch tucked beneath a plank that didn't quite match the rest. His mother would have known, the way she knew everything about the place, every crooked board, every hidden drawer, every tiny flaw in the valley's perfection. Cale pried the hatch open with a pocket tool and slipped into the crawl space. It smelled like cedar and clean metal, an odd mix of home and hardware. A narrow ladder led to a small access panel inside the cabin. He climbed up, pushed, and the panel popped open into the kitchen floor. The cabin was dark and still. No warm welcome lights, no voice assistant chirping about temperature settings. Just silence thick enough to press against his skin. He stepped inside and shut the panel behind him. His implant pulsed once. Then the cabin breathed. A faint vibration ran through the walls, like a sleeping animal shifting under a blanket. Cale froze, listening. The air changed, subtle ion scent, a temperature drop, a pressure shift that made his ears pop. His mother's journal was exactly where Chapter 2 had ended, hidden behind a false panel in the living room beam. Cale slid it free and set it on the table, hands steady despite the adrenaline. He didn't open it yet. He already knew what mattered. The data shard. He pulled it out, found the old terminal Lisa had described, and plugged it into a port concealed beneath the bookshelf. The wood panel beside it slid away soundlessly, revealing a recessed screen that looked older than the cabin itself. A dull line of light appeared. Verdant Admin Core, Legacy Mode. Cale's breath caught. So you're real. The screen flickered and text typed itself as if someone were seated behind it. Primary claimant detected. Trust authority. Rourke family. Status. Dormant or unresolved. Awaiting owner confirmation. Kale stared. Owner. The word felt wrong and too heavy for one person. A second line appeared. Welcome home, Kale Rourke. His implant buzzed with the same low-frequency pressure as before, synchronized with the screen. Whatever this was, it wasn't simply software. It felt like a mind that knew his name the way a lock knows its key. Kale placed both palms on the table, forcing himself to think like an auditor, not a son. Show me the deed scope. The screen complied instantly. Property domain. Verdant Vale Biosphere. Subsystems. Water, air, climate, power, security, access. Residential licenses. Active. Override limits. Owner discretion. Kale swallowed. That's the whole valley. As if to confirm it, the cabin's floor emitted a gentle vibration, a power relay responding like muscle. Outside, faint footsteps crunched grass. Kale moved to the window and peeked through the edge of the curtain. 2 HOA enforcement drones hovered at the meadow's edge, scanning with blue light. Beyond them, Maris Vane walked with a small group in crisp formation. 2 compliance officers and, behind them, a pair of colonial security personnel. She hadn't waited 3 hours. She'd come hunting. Kale stepped back from the window. You told her. A line appeared. No external notification sent. HOA scan attempt detected. Unauthorized access. Escalating. The cabin lights flicked on by themselves, soft amber, like a home welcoming family. Yet the warmth felt staged, almost sarcastic. Kale's implant pinged again, this time with a warning tone. Perimeter threat active. He hadn't confirmed reclamation, but the system was already bracing. Like it had been waiting for an excuse to wake up. A knock struck the front door, sharp, authoritative, designed to carry. Mr. Rourke. Maris called, voice bright enough to be weaponized. Open the door. You are violating multiple community guidelines. Kale walked toward the entry, stopping a meter short. This is my cabin, he said loudly. Leave. Maris laughed once, a clean sound that pretended nothing was wrong. Oh, sweetheart, no. This property is under HOA oversight until legal resolution. We are here to escort you out. Kale leaned closer to the door without touching it. You're not afraid of guidelines. You're afraid of the system behind them. Silence. Then her voice sharpened, dropping the sugary layer. Open the door, she repeated. Now. Behind her, one of the colonial officers added. Sir, comply. We don't want to escalate. Kale glanced at the recessed screen. If I reclaim, he whispered, what happens? Text formed slowly this time, as if choosing words. Reclamation activates full admin authority. Fail-safe protocols may engage under threat conditions. Risk level. Variable. Variable, Kale muttered. That's comforting. Maris knocked again, harder. You're trespassing, and I have witnesses. Open up before this becomes forcible entry. Kale took a breath and opened the door a crack, not enough for anyone to slip through, just enough to show he wasn't hiding. Maris stood on the porch in perfect posture, holoslate held like a judge's hammer. Her eyes flicked past his shoulder into the cabin. You broke in, she said. I entered my own home. She lifted her slate. This cabin is unregistered under current residency compliance. Your presence is disruptive. Residents have reported distress. Kale's gaze slid to the officers behind her. Did you come to arrest me, or check facts? The male officer shifted awkwardly. We're here to maintain order. Maris's smile widened. Order requires you to leave. Kale lowered his voice. What did you see on the scan, Maris? Her expression didn't move, but her pupils tightened. Nothing that matters. It mattered enough for you to sprint here with security in tow. Maris held his stare, then leaned closer, voice still sweet but now edged with steel. You can tell yourself you have rights. The valley doesn't work on nostalgia. It works on governance. Kale's temper flickered, then steadied. You're not governance. You're a gatekeeper with a badge you printed. Maris's lips pressed thin. She tapped her slate twice. Immediately, The compliance drones moved in, their lenses brightening. One projected a pale blue field toward the door. "Emergency compliance action," Meris announced, loud for the officers to hear. "An authorized occupant refusing removal." The field touched the doorframe and died. The drone wobbled, lost stabilization, then dropped to the porch with a dull clunk, like a bird hitting glass. The second drone blinked red, then shut down mid-air and crashed into the grass. Meris's smile vanished. Behind her, a colonial officer swore. "What the hell, our network just dropped." Cale stared past them. Down by the road, the police SUVs flickered as their roof lights sparked, then went dark. Doors unlocked and relocked rapidly, confused. The wind in the meadow stuttered, stopped, then resumed as if someone were testing it. Cale turned his head slightly, speaking to the cabin rather than Meris. "You did that." The screen behind him typed. "Unauthorized override attempt neutralized. Threat source. HOA compliance grid." Meris took a step back, recalculating. "What did you do?" she demanded. Cale met her eyes. "I didn't do anything. The cabin did." Meris's voice snapped. "This is exactly why you don't belong here. You're dangerous." Cale laughed, short and humorless. "I walked in with a bag. You arrived with officers and drones. Tell me which of us looks dangerous." One of the colonial officers raised a hand, palm outward. Everyone calm down. "Ms. Vane, step back." Meris rounded on him, furious for the first time. "No. This is HOA jurisdiction." The officer frowned. "We are colonial security. There is no HOA jurisdiction above us." Meris's eyes flashed. "You're not hearing me. The valley has standards. It has protocols. It has." Her words cut off as the ground beneath the porch trembled, subtle but undeniable. A low hum rose from under the cabin, like a generator spinning up after decades asleep. Cale felt it in his bones. The screen behind him displayed a single line, calm and merciless. "Threat protocols arming. Owner confirmation required." Cale looked from the text to the people on his porch, officers uneasy, Meris rigid with anger, the meadow beyond perfectly green and perfectly controlled. If he confirmed reclamation, he would take command of a sleeping giant. If he didn't, Meris would keep digging until she broke something that couldn't be repaired. Cale closed the door gently, locking out the noise. His heart pounded once, hard. Then he turned back to the terminal and whispered, "Show me what your defenses actually do." And the valley outside went quiet, as if it was holding its breath for his answer. The cabin didn't answer Cale with alarms or dramatic countdowns. It answered with truth. Across the recessed terminal, diagrams unfolded like a surgeon laying out organs. The river gates hidden beneath polished stones, the wind baffles inside the art sculptures, the subsoil stabilizers that kept the meadow from turning into swamp. Even the trees had anchors and micro-actuators, subtle enough to pass as nature, precise enough to reshape a landscape. Defense protocols weren't turrets and lasers. They were control. Cale's throat tightened. "You can lock the valley down." A single line typed back. "I can preserve biosphere integrity. Threat response is dependent on owner parameters." Cale exhaled slowly. "So if I confirm reclamation, you'll treat anyone opposing me as a threat." The cursor blinked once, then. "Anyone opposing biosphere stability." A distinction that sounded noble until you realized how easily it could be twisted. Outside, Meris's voice carried through the door, muffled but sharp. His tampering with infrastructure. His endangering residents. A colonial officer replied, strained. You brought drones that just dropped dead. That's not him, that's the property system reacting." Meris didn't let the officer's tone change the outcome. She never had. "Then arrest him for sabotage. This is a hazardous anomaly. Do your job." Cale stepped away from the terminal and opened his mother's journal. The pages smelled faintly of cedar and ink. She'd written in quick, decisive strokes, as if stopping to be emotional would cost her time. "Cale, if you're reading this, she's probably already smiling at you. She always smiles when she thinks she's winning." His jaw clenched. The HOA isn't the problem. It's the tool. The valley was built to be owned, managed, inherited, and someone decided people would be easier to control than systems. Cale ran his thumb across the last line, then shut the book. He didn't want power, but he wanted Maris Vane out of his home. The cabin hummed again, a quiet insistence. Owner confirmation required. Cale returned to the terminal and spoke with a steadiness he didn't feel. Confirm reclamation. Minimal harm parameters. No lethal force. No permanent injury. The screen paused, as if considering whether it trusted him. Owner parameters received. Minimal harm mode. Accepted. Governance status. Active. The cabin's lights brightened by a fraction. Beneath the floor, something heavy engaged. Locks, relays, old mechanisms waking like tendons flexing after years of stillness. Cale's implant pulsed. Then the valley changed. Not visually at first. The air simply tightened, like the atmosphere had become attentive. Somewhere beyond the porch, the wind dropped into an unnatural lull. The river's surface didn't freeze, but its chatter lowered until it sounded far away. Cale opened the door and stepped outside. Maris stood in the grass with her compliance officers, flanked by colonial security. Her holoslate was held high, broadcasting a claim of authority as if volume could replace legitimacy. When she saw Cale, her face shifted into triumph so fast it looked rehearsed. "There you are," she said, loud enough for witnesses. "Step away from the structure. You're trespassing and interfering with community systems." Cale moved down the porch steps and onto the meadow. He didn't raise his hands, didn't posture. He simply walked toward the bridge. Maris blinked once. "Where do you think you're going?" "To a place where everyone can hear," Cale said. One officer started after him. Cale glanced over his shoulder. "I'm not running." The officer hesitated, then fell into step at a cautious distance. Maris followed with the rest, heels pressing clean marks into grass too perfect to resist. "This is pointless," she called. "Residents don't want you here. You're an outsider who thinks a sentimental story gives you rights." Cale reached the bridge and stopped at its center. Below, the water moved clear and fast, and for the first time he noticed the rhythm. Too steady, too regulated, like a heartbeat controlled by software. Maris stopped at the near edge of the bridge, refusing to step fully onto it. She didn't want to meet him at equal height. She preferred her ground. Cale turned to face her. "You called cops on me because you assumed I'd fold." "I called them because we protect our community," Maris said, smiling again. "You broke in." "I entered through a service hatch the HOA didn't know existed," Cale replied. "That doesn't make it breaking in. It makes your control incomplete." Her smile tightened. "You don't understand what this place is." Cale lifted his chin. "I do. It's a biosphere with curated nature and a compliance regime wrapped in rustic wood. It's pretty prison architecture." A few residents had appeared at a distance, drawn by voices and the strange quiet. They stood near fences, on porches, behind windows, watching like people who'd learned to stay cautious. Maris noticed them and warmed her tone, turning public. "Everyone, please remain calm. Colonial security is here. This man is disrupting infrastructure." Cale spoke to the residents instead of her. "Has anyone here ever asked to see the valley's core systems? The water controls? The climate ledger? The resource allocations?" No one answered. They didn't have to. Silence was its own confession. Maris snapped her fingers at a compliance officer. "Proceed with removal." The officer raised a handheld override device and pointed it toward the cabin. Cale didn't move. The device whined, searching for a network. Nothing responded. The officer frowned, shook it, and tried again. Maris's eyes flashed. "Why isn't it working?" Cale's implant buzzed with a soft internal ping, like a nod. Maris's composure cracked. "What did you do to the grid?" Cale answered plainly. "I didn't break it. I reclaimed it." A murmur spread through the watching residents. Confusion. Doubt. A few sharp looks exchanged, fear tasting like oxygen. Maris's laugh was brittle. Reclaimed it. You can't reclaim something that belongs to the association. Cale lifted the old key between two fingers. Sunlight flashed on worn metal. You've been running a trust you didn't own. You've been selling authority that wasn't yours to sell. Maris's face reddened in precise, controlled increments. That is slander. Cale turned his wrist and tapped a command on his implant. The cabin terminal pushed a broadcast pulse across the local net. Low power, wide range, nothing flashy. It didn't need to be. Screens flickered in cabin windows across the valley. Wrist displays lit up. A few drones hovering near rooftops went still, then rebooted under a new identifier. A message appeared everywhere at once. Verdant Vale Trust. Ownership authenticated. Primary authority. Cale Rourke. HOA authority. Revoked pending review. Audit logs available. Resident access enabled. Maris froze as if the air had slapped her. One resident, a man in gardening gloves, stared at his wrist display and whispered, "We can see the logs." Lysa emerged near a fence line, arms folded, eyes steady. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. Maris snapped back into motion. "This is illegal," she shouted, but the performance had lost its footing. "Security, arrest him." A colonial officer stepped forward. Gaze hard now. "Ms. Vane, you've been claiming jurisdiction you don't have. And if these audit logs are real?" "They're fabricated," Maris hissed. "He's hacking. He's manipulating you." Cale's voice cut through cleanly. "Then prove it. Open the files. Look at the signatures." Maris's hand trembled around her holoslate. For the first time, she looked less like a queen and more like a person trapped on stage when the lights fail. Her eyes flicked toward the river, then toward the cabins, then toward the distant road. And Cale realized her next move before she made it. "Stop," he warned. "Don't do it." Maris's lips curled. "Don't do what?" She tapped a hidden corner of her slate. Too quick, too practiced. A buried command. The valley responded with a low, ominous tone that rolled through the meadow like distant thunder. Cale's implant displayed a single alert. Failsafe initiated. Biosphere purge sequence. Residents gasped. One woman clutched her child. A man backed away from the bridge, eyes wide. Maris lifted her chin, triumphant again. "If I can't keep this valley safe, no one will. Evacuation will clear the residents, and the board will handle the rest." Cale's stomach dropped. This isn't about safety. It never was. Maris's smile turned cruel. It's about control. Cale didn't shout. He didn't plead. He simply spoke to the valley the way you'd speak to an intelligent machine that wanted to be useful. "Admin core," he said, voice firm. "Override purge. Cancel failsafe. Lock Maris Vane's access permanently. Detain her with minimal harm." The air shuddered, like the world inhaling. Then the humming stopped. The river's rhythm relaxed. The pressure in Cale's skull eased. A line of light moved across the grass toward Maris's feet, not a beam, not a weapon, an invisible boundary that became real only when she tried to step back. Her ankles locked as if gravity had changed its mind. Maris jerked, furious. "What is this? Let go." Two slim restraint drones rose from the meadow, emerging like insects from sleep. They didn't strike. They didn't punish. They simply held her arms in place with steady force. Cale walked toward her slowly, stopping just out of reach. "You called cops because you thought I was powerless," he said quietly. "And because you assumed no one would question you." Maris's eyes burned. "You think you've won. You just became the villain. A man with a valley on a leash." Cale glanced toward the residents watching, toward the officers, toward the cabins that had been homes and cages at the same time. Then he looked back at her. "No. I became responsible." He turned to colonial security. "Arrest her under colonial law. Fraud, coercion, unlawful detention, sabotage attempt. You have the logs." The officer nodded, grim. "We do." Maris struggled, face twisted. "You can't do this. The HOA." Cale cut her off with a calm finality. The HOA is done. As they led her away, the valley didn't feel triumphant. It felt quieter. Honest. Lysa approached the bridge and stopped beside Cale, eyes on the river. "So," she said softly, "you really own it." Cale watched the water move, free enough to look natural again. "I don't want to." Lysa gave a small nod. "Then don't act like she did." Cale looked out across verdant vale, still impossibly green, still engineered, still beautiful. But now, at least, it wasn't pretending. His implant pinged one last time. Owner status updated. Steward. Cale closed his eyes briefly, then opened them and breathed the valley in, not as property, but as a living system that had finally stopped lying about what it was.